It's pretty unusual for a member of the opposition to contribute in the budget debate in support of legislation. But I have to say that I'm very pleased that I'm able to do that. This is a good bill. The budget measures financial support for newborn children bill. It hasn't got the snappiest title. It could have been called the paid parental leave extension and parental tax credit extension, which probably would have been less slappy. But the content of it is something that should be supported. It doesn't go nearly as far as we would like. It doesn't go nearly as far as the bill that Sue Moroney has had before this Parliament for a long time, which has been to a select committee, been through an extensive consultation process, in fact had 3,809 submissions, 3,809 submissions on Sue Moroney's extension to paid parental leave bill, which was drawn out of the members' ballot. Of those 3,809 submissions, Mr Speaker, 99.6% agreed in total with Sue Moroney's bill. That's not a bad record, and that's why I can't work out why we are getting this half-hearted, Labour-light, we better do something because we're clearly in bother budget bill. Why didn't they just support a decent bill when 99.6% of 3,809 submitters supported it? I was very interested in the contribution, not actually from Mr Sabin particularly, although it was a robust contribution, and I'm sure that he believes everything he said, but I was very interested in the contribution from his colleague Louise Upston, who stood in this House and said this is not an ideological debate. There's nothing ideological about paid parental leave. We've always supported paid parental leave. I'm a bit concerned about the members. I'm a bit concerned about the members' memory. It's quite early on a Wednesday night, and she has totally forgotten the voting history of her party since 2002. 2002, when we were in surplus, budget surplus, when Labour introduced the first ever paid parental leave provisions into legislation in New Zealand, National voted against it. 100% of National members voted against it, 100% of Labour members voted for it, and they said some very unusual things during that debate. So for the senior whip of the National Party to come into this House and go, shock, horror, this is not an ideological debate, we've always supported paid parental leave, beggars belief, because it's just not true, it's not credible. In fact, I think the most credible thing that could be added to the debate is to revisit some of the quotes that were made during that original 2002 debate and consider them in the fact that here on the 15th of May, we are only a few months away from the 2014 election, because one of the interesting contributors to that debate was Judith Collins, who said, during the paid parental leave debate, said it is another example of the government using taxpayers' money to try to win some votes. Who would have thought that that government would try to use taxpayers' money to win some votes? I haven't heard Minister Collins, I think she's still a minister. I haven't heard the Honourable Judith Collins take a call yet in this debate, but I would like to hear her and see if we can measure her contribution during the earlier paid parental leave debate, introduced by a Labour-led government with a surplus in our budget when it was opposed by the National Party for all sorts of strange reasons. Mr Speaker, I would much prefer that the rigorous process that the Select Committee has gone through, the Government Administration Committee, with some actually excellent contributions from the National Party members, I must admit, on the public record now, I think they've contributed very well. Rigorous attention to the money, How much is it going to cost? What can we afford? When should it come in? Who might be impacted best and worst out of the people who are currently entitled to receive paid parental leave? And then we looked at the broader social impacts of extending paid parental leave. We looked at the impacts on the education system, on early childhood, on the health system. There was nowhere that we looked that Sue Moroney's bill did not stack up to be a smart idea. That bill should have been reported back to this House some time ago, and I think would have got a majority of support of this House. In fact, it still might. It's a darn sight better than this bill. Why was it that the government did not support us reporting that bill back on time, having gone through a proper process with 3,809 submissions, a large number of which we heard, 99.6% of which supported Sue Moroney's extension to paid parental leave? Why did the government not support us getting the bill back at the right time? But yet, weeks and weeks and weeks later, here we are under urgency passing a bill that does half of it. This is like a Labor light excuse. Not only doesn't do the proper job, doesn't do it nearly as well as the comprehensive package that Sue Moroney proposed, but doesn't introduce, what is it, just 2 weeks? 2 weeks extension on April Fool's Day next year. Why is this bill being rammed through under urgency? Why is that necessary, to do it under urgency when it doesn't come into effect until April next year, and we have already done all the work at Select Committee? We would be happy to pick it up and do a decent job of it. I get really frustrated when there's no need for urgency, and the public, who actually are the people who are most the beneficiaries of this additional support, are being denied their right to have a say. What is the government scared of, that they won't put this bill even through a truncated Select Committee process? Some people, Minister Bridges, might come along and say they supported it. And I think the Minister of Labour should welcome the chance to have one thing that he has initiated during his entire term as a minister being supported by members of the public. If I was that minister, I would jump at that chance. She might be. Simon's eyes light up at the prospect that he's just outlined. Mr. Speaker, I don't actually think it's likely, but I don't understand why are members of the public not being given an opportunity to have a say in this. There is nothing urgent about it. It is not the old-fashioned budget urgency provisions that would be coming into effect at midnight. Remember, Mr. Sabin, you might be too young, but your grandparents may have told you about the olden days when people used to wait for budget day and then they'd go down to the petrol station and fill their car up with petrol in case the government put the price of petrol up that night. That was real urgency, not like this measure, which has no need for urgency at all. It's straight cutting the public out, and I think it's a shame. Mr. Speaker, I just want to quickly quote another couple of national members, because I think it's worthwhile putting on the record what they really think about paid parental leave. Anne Tolley said, this is when it was first introduced. She said, paid parental leave shows how the Labour Alliance government is stuck in the radical feminist era of the 1960s and 70s and is completely out of touch with women of the 21st century and their diverse involvement in today's labour force. Then she said, this is about paid parental leave. This is about paid parental leave that we're extending under the national government under urgency. She said this is bad legislation. It's a travesty. Well, Mr. Bridges, welcome to the radical feminist era of the 1960s and 70s that you're supporting. I don't think Mr. Bridges was born then. I don't think he was even born then. And Nick Smith said, and I wouldn't be surprised if Minister Smith wouldn't repeat this during this debate, in 2002 he said, I say that if a member went out of their way to draft a dumb bill, this would have to be it. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the Honourable Nick Smith would be happy to repeat that allegation in the House today. I think it's a good step forward. It's half-hearted. It's not as good as we proposed, but I'm glad the government's finally come to their senses on at least one issue.
Chris Hockenvold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with regard to the last speaker who